state agency meeting for the state fiscal recovery funds. So all of your organizations are receiving state fiscal recovery funds, and our office's responsibility is to work with you and to work with the state agencies and others who are receiving those funds to make sure that everybody knows what the uses are and that we're using them appropriately and that we're monitoring our performance and tracking that so that we're using the funds for the purposes that the legislature intended them. We're really excited to have you all here. I know we've met with many of you individually, and we wanted to get you together as a group to talk through several of the certain topics that we have that we think would be relevant to everybody. And we hope this will be a group that we may meet again, just depending on what you kind of tell us you want out of these meetings, and where we can get to know each other, and hopefully you can learn from one another, and we can share lessons learned that with you that we've had with our state agency partners. I will say our state agency partners are kind of in a different area since they've had to work directly with the legislature as well. So I don't think we're going to go around and introduce everybody right now unless y'all think we have time. I'm trying to, sorry, again, navigate on my phone. So why don't I briefly just tell you who we have from our team. We do have quite a few NCPRO folks. Mikey is with our performance. Helen is with our grants management. Tommy Clark is my deputy director. Neil and Marquise are with our grants management. Joy is with our finance team. Tara is our grants management director. Natalie is with our reporting team. Jamila is our chief of staff. And Young Jin is with our data management. So he's with the folks that help you with your PANGRAM questions. John Leskovic is with our grants management team, and Andy is with reporting. Ethan is also with grants management, and John Williams is our general counsel, and Hank is also with our reporting team. So it looks like we have a number of folks here from many of our different entities, and you are welcome to put your names and organizations in the chat if you would like, or just when you ask questions, you can just let us know. So we're glad to have you all here. I think many of the NCPRO folks know you, but you may not always know each other. So I'm going to walk briefly through an overview of our SFRF process, and then Tara is going to talk about some common definitions and requirements, as well as our risk assessments and monitoring, and so you'll know kind of what to expect. Young Jin is going to talk about PANGRAM. Neil will show you how you request funds, and Andy and his team are here to answer and show you how to do your monthly reporting. And we'll also talk about performance measures, as we know that these funds are going to be looked at from Treasury as well as from the General Assembly and the state auditor in terms of how we're measuring performance. So that's kind of on our agenda for today. So we have a fairly, it looks more lengthy than it is, but we have a process that many of you have already gone through in terms of starting off by thinking about how you're going to use these funds. And those are the project templates from NCPRO, how we're going to measure performance, and discussing any questions you have about what the money is for, how it can be used. Most of you are at step 6, so you can see that after you return those templates and your budget projections, that was an important part of making sure you were ready to receive the funds and thinking about how you were going to use them. And we have signed MOUs electronically and have done that because it's important from an audit perspective as well as from making sure everyone's on the same page. And then setting up your PANGRAM accounts, which I know you've probably worked with Young Jin and his team, if not your grants manager, on. And now we're at the point where you really are requesting and receiving funds. So some of your entities have gotten your funds, and some of them are still working on how you request them. just to give you a general sense of our approach, um, we try to give you the funds as you need them. We sort of learned the hard way through coronavirus relief funds. We gave everybody out the money very quickly. We tried to do that, and then there were a lot of returns back and forth. So either entities couldn't use the funds for what they thought they could, or they just didn't need them. Um, and then we would have to go back and forth. That's not the best process, and we should just give you the funds as you need them, and it will save all of us a lot of headache and hassle in terms of those transactions back and forth, as well as following it from a reporting standpoint. Many of you probably have started on steps 7, 8, and 9, but I'll talk about those pre-contracting processes. We're happy to answer any questions as you may have them, around thinking about how you're going to use the funds, any sorts of compliance and monitoring plans that you put together, and then we'll provide and have already probably provided to some of you training on these requirements and making sure that you sort of know what you need. We also are going to go over the monthly report, so that's step 8. And just as a reminder for step 9, we have to make sure that all these funds are obligated by December 31st, 2024, and that all of them are expended by December 31st, 2026. And we know for many of you, this will be a process where we work together and help answer questions kind of as you go through. I am happy to answer questions right now if anyone has any. Okay, hearing none, we will go to the next slide. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Tara Fikes, who is our grants director, for the next 2 parts of the agenda. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. My task is to begin by talking a little bit about some of the alphabet soup, if you will, of government. And we're going to do this not to insult your intelligence, but just to be sure that we're on the same page when we use some of these common acronyms. So we'll start with NCPRO, which of course you know that refers to the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office, and that is our office, and you're well acquainted with this office. ARPA refers to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which is the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill that was passed by Congress in March of 2021 that provides funding for the State Fiscal Recovery Fund. You may have also seen reference to SLFRF, LFRF, and SFRF. Now, say all of that 3 times fast. But I'll start with SLFRF, which is the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund Program, which refers to the Coronavirus State Fiscal and Local Recovery Fund program that provides funds to enable states and local governments to respond and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. From that program, funds were provided to local governments through the Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which you may see referred to as the LFRF program. Funds were provided directly to local governments for their recovery efforts from the pandemic. And then funds were also provided to state governments. And the state of North Carolina received $5.4 billion in state fiscal recovery funds to respond and recover from the pandemic. And so you may see any of these 3 acronyms all stemming from the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund program. UEI is another term that you may see. UEI, the unique entity identifier, replaced what we have known as the DUNS number, which is a unique entity identifier, just a unique numerical number that identifies an entity as doing business with the federal government. In April, the federal government started using this unique entity identifier as the identifier as opposed to the DUNS number. And some of you will recall that when they made that switch in April, it became very difficult to acquire the UEI number. It became very difficult to get in touch with those that were assisting in obtaining that number. But hopefully that big demand has settled down a little bit and you're able to get support if you need support in acquiring that number. We can go to the next slide. UST simply refers to the United States Treasury, which is the entity that's providing the SFRF funding. The North Carolina General Assembly is often referred to as NCGA. NCAC refers to the North Carolina Administrative Code, which is just a compilation of the administrative rules governing state agencies. The Office of the State Controller is referred to as OSC, and OSC manages the state's accounting system and refers to and is referred to as the Chief Fiscal Officer. OSCA, the Office of the State Auditor. I think we all know what the state auditor does. And very interestingly, if you look at the state auditor's website, they say they're the taxpayers' watchdog. So they, I guess, a watchdog for us all, and they are there to ensure that public resources are accounted for properly. And then lastly, the NCAS, referred to as NCAS, it is the North Carolina accounting system, which is the accounting system, the primary accounting system that's used by most state agencies. And so you may hear these terms used by some of us government folk, and you may hear others use those terms as well. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody's able to navigate this government soup. Okay, moving on. We have a few definitions that we just wanted to review very quickly, and particularly these key terms. Um, those key terms being subrecipient, beneficiary, and contractor. When we talk about subrecipients, we're talking about entities that receive financial assistance to carry out a project. And many of you are considered to be subrecipients because you're receiving these funds to carry out a specific project or a specific program. When we speak to beneficiaries, we're talking about individuals or entities who are receiving funds for the purpose of directly benefiting an individual or entity as a result of experiencing a public health impact or negative economic impact as a result of the pandemic, and more particularly the COVID-19 pandemic in this regard. So you're aware that the General Assembly provided funds to many entities to help them to recover from the effects of the pandemic. And then when we speak of contractors, we're talking about entities that are under contract to provide a specific service for recipient or subrecipient. We also wanted to highlight the definition of obligation and wanted to note that U.S. Treasury particularly uses this definition of obligation and specifically says that it is an order placed for property and services, and also refers to entering into contracts, subawards, or similar transactions that require payment. And why do these distinctions matter? And specifically, why do they matter in as it relates to what U.S. Treasury requires? We wanted to note that subrecipients are subject to subrecipient monitoring and reporting. We also want to note that beneficiaries, on the other hand, are not subject to subrecipient monitoring and reporting according to the U.S. Treasury. Although, of course, we at NCPRO, we do want to be able to tell the story. We'll want to be able to tell the story of how these funds have impacted our local communities and our agencies. So we will be asking for some minimal information to help us tell that story. For contractors hired by recipients and subrecipients, they are subject to federal and state procurement rules according to Treasury guidelines. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay.
Yes, Tara,
Mhm,
actually, I do
mhm.
have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
Great. We are doing an RFP and we'll be selecting a vendor to undertake the design of a software system for us. And so do we need to make sure then that in the RFP, because we're about ready to let that, to go out with that, do we need to say in there that they must adhere to all the state and federal procurement requirements?
You are soliciting the services of a vendor.
Correct. They will be a contractor for us.
So, in your solicitation of that vendor, you will want to adhere to the procurement requirements.
Okay, so we need to do that. Do they
Mhm.
then, as our contractor, also need to do that?
Once you have secured their services, they will be a contractor for you providing the service, correct?
Okay. Yes.
Mhm. So
Okay.
then they will be a contractor.
Okay, and who would be the best person to advise us on ensuring that we are indeed meeting those requirements?
Okay. We have a contact with the state procurement office. Can someone help me with that?
Oh, you just mean purchase and contract?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we just need to
Mhm.
contact them then.
Mhm.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Just
Yeah,
want to
we
be
have a
sure we're contacting.
person. I can't remember the person's name that we've been talking with.
Okay, well, we'll be sure.
We've been talking with Haley Pfeiffer
Okay.
Haynes, but just know they're doing the best they can to help people with this because this is sort of an extra duty as assigned that they
Yes.
have gotten. And so I would just say make sure that as you work with your grants manager at NCPRO, you copy them on it so that we can help you and we can push DOA along if we need to. I know you have your own relationships with them, but that'll help make sure that they know.
We want everybody to be in sync. Absolutely.
Well, and if we can help you to help them move it along faster, we'll do that.
And we want you to help us. Yes, help them.
Okay. We know this is not ideal, and we're thankful that our state procurement laws and rules align with the federal procurement rules, but it's difficult at times for sure.
No, that's fine, and we just want to be sure we're doing it right. So we appreciate all this because I'm not sure that that's something we were aware of before, and luckily we haven't released the RFP yet. So we'll make sure we get that in there. Thank you.
Great. Great timing then. Great. Thank you for that question. Are there any others? Okay, so I'm sorry, Tom, are you're on mute though?
Yeah, I guess some of our questions should be discussed offline, or is that since some people are in more unique situations than others?
Okay, sure.
Or-
Or if you think you have a question that might be good for the group, that's fine. Either way, we are always available offline, or your
Okay,
grant manager is also available. So I'll leave that up to you.
okay. Absent further direction, I'll take it offline then.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So we'll move on to talk about risk assessments and monitoring some activities that we'll be involved in here at NCPRO and be involved in with you as our partners. Um, so one of the things we'll be doing with you as our subrecipients is going through a risk assessment process. And I realize that many of you have already been involved in the risk assessment process already. But I just wanted to highlight that the purpose of the risk assessments is to evaluate the potential financial and compliance risk of our subrecipients. And we undertake this activity by reviewing single audits, reviewing previous financial and programmatic performance of subrecipients, we also review your previous grant experience, your policies, your procedures, and whether or not you have formal policies and procedures, particularly as it relates to conformance with uniform guidance and any other risk factors that might be appropriate, considering the program that you are striving to implement. Once we have completed the risk assessment process, and as I said, I know we have completed this process for many of you already, and it's been brought to my attention that we probably need to let you know what the result of that risk assessment was. But I am pleased to say that we have not encountered any high risk subrecipients to date. And if we can go to the next slide, we do have three ratings, that being low, medium, and high. The risk rating will determine the type of monitoring that we will conduct. Most of our risk assessments that we've completed to date have been low risk, so that's good news, such that most of our subrecipients have previous experience with grants and have previously had good experience in grant implementation and therefore starting off at a good place. So we look forward to continuing to work with you to implement the SFRF grants in similar fashion. But you see here in this table that along with the risk rating that you receive is the type of monitoring that we'll be conducting. And so you see with low risk recipients, we will be engaged in accountability calls as well as reporting reviews. If you are determined to have a medium risk, we do accountability calls and desk reviews. And then those at high risk, we will be engaged in accountability calls as well as on-site monitoring visits. You see in looking at the type of monitoring that we'll be doing that accountability calls is listed for all three levels. So we will certainly be engaged in accountability calls. Our grant managers will be um, engaged in these calls and engaging you in these calls. And these calls will occur monthly and they will address your progress towards your project goals, your progress rather towards your project goals. They'll talk to you about your expenditures, get some updates on your monitoring plans if you have subrecipients, and also talk about your budget and future forecast needs and any other needs that you might have or any areas of support that you may need from us as an agency. And so your grant manager will be in touch with you to schedule these accountability calls. And in fact, they probably have already started occurring for some of you. But we will continue to engage in these monthly accountability calls just to keep the lines of communication open and to be sure that we are aware of how these projects are progressing along, and it also enables us to provide any technical assistance that we might be able to provide to assist you in implementing your projects. And I'd just like to also note that even though we have identified the type of monitoring that will occur based on your risk rating, we also may conduct some desk reviews and may actually come on site for some of these projects, just so we get an idea of what's happening in real time and get an opportunity to see what you're doing on the ground so that we have some firsthand knowledge of some of the success stories that we know are going to come out of these SFRF projects. So while, like as I said before, many of you and most of you are going to be considered low risk recipients, and we still want to be able to have firsthand knowledge of your projects and actually be able to collect maybe some best practices from some of the work that you're doing. And that might be best done by actually visiting you on site. So we want to reserve the ability to be able to do that. So don't be surprised if we ask to come on site and actually see your projects in real time. Also, a big part of monitoring for low risk recipients will be, of course, reviewing your reporting that we'll be asking you to be doing on a monthly basis, which we'll talk about in a moment. But we hope that through the accountability calls and the monthly reports that we will be able to have a good picture of the progress that is occurring with your projects, and that we'll also maintain open communication, maintain the ability to talk through any issues that may come up and help to problem solve together so that we can help you be successful in implementing your various projects. Okay, and I think with that, I think that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions about risk assessments and monitoring? Okay, if not, our grant managers will certainly be in touch with you soon through the accountability calls, I am certain. Thank you so much. So I'll turn this now over to Young Jen, who will be talking about PANGRAM.
Good afternoon. My name is Yongjun Lee. I'm database manager here. Talking about the PANGRAM. Most of you already have the NCID user created and login, register and login to the PANGRAM. Yeah, the PANGRAM it's a pandemic grants and awards management. So we call PANGRAM. And the definition by Webster is a short sentence containing all 26 letters English alphabet. So that's our working philosophy and method to cover everything in PANGRAM system. You log in, you can see all the documents, agreements. You get there to request money and file expenditure report with us. The PANGRAM architecture, you see the highest tech architecture is we call programs. Majority of our projects with the non-state agency are considered the state fiscal recovery fund revenue replacement projects. From here, there's multiple agreements created with each one with all different entities. Some entities receive more than one, but most of you just one contract or one agreement between you and NCPRO. The contact person work with you guys, the directly contact person, the grant manager, and then the other folks in our NCPRO team to do support, reporting, technical issues. We do the support. But yeah, directly contact the contract manager. For you, the grant manager work with you to get all the documents to have the agreement created, including the financial information, the banking account, all this set up when the contract is ready. And then you log into the system to request the money. You either request it by quarterly, annually. Some of you are beneficiary, you can request all your money just at once. And then after you get money, you start to implement the project and you starting to have the expenses. We request you to come into the PANGRAM system to let us know your monthly expenditure. Then we can have an idea the progress of the project implementation. Some of you maybe even have more sub recipient that will be as a supporting document, including the expenditure report. Okay, next slide. Yeah, when you come into the PANGRAM, that's the interface you saw. There's the three sections. The first, search, and the second section is create. The third one is the resource. You can look at more information. Search, you come here to see the agreements or the contract, all the documents, and then you also want to review our previous payment request expenditure report. That's the search section for. You take an action on the second section and either request money, that's a link called new reimbursement claim, and then you start file the expenditure report monthly after your project started to have expense. Okay, next slide. Yeah, that's the online form for the payment request. Those information, light blue, those are area you need to fill in, and then you give us the justification why you need this amount of money in this period, and everything is correct. And then you click that yellow check button to make sure there's no error. You submit to us, and then our internal process to make sure all the data everything is correct, and then the process take 2 or 3 days. The final money will be in your account in 1 week or so. That's the payment request. Next slide. Every month when you starting have the expenditures, you report to us monthly how much you spend in each category, accounting category. And the date for the monthly expenditure report is always the first day of the month and the last day of the month. You report the previous month for the expenditure report. Only the first report you may start the date could be across multiple months, and then the following report will be always 1 month, and then starting with the beginning of the month and ending with the last day of the month. There's some very simple, only like 7 or 8 questions we ask the progress of the project. So answer those questions. The one thing is obligation. Just make sure the obligation is the one Tara already defined that what's the obligation, and including any expenditure already spent. That's also obligation, including all this. The monthly obligation that's in the question too. Everything's good, and then you share any comments or any messages you want us know, and put in the comment section and attach the supporting document and submit. Again, right after you submit your expenditure report, the grant manager will review this. And then accounting team will review this to make sure all things are correct. We may return the expenditure report back to you to make some corrections, or if there's some things we are not clear, get back to you. Because of the window for the reporting, it's only 2 weeks from the 1st to the 15th. And then we review that. So if there's any issue, just get back to us as quickly as possible with the grant manager to solve any issues. Then we're waiting to the next month for the reporting window. So far, we're getting the expenditure report very good from the state agency, also from the sub-recipient. Thank you so much. We're keep improving those to make all the things easier and take you less time to file the expenditure report. That's the PANGRAM things. If you have any questions, just let me know. Here, that's the link for the PANGRAM system login. If the any field you not sure what it is and how to get into the PANGRAM, you need a new user. There's an external user guide on our website. Yeah, again, any questions, the first contact is a grant manager. So all the NCPRO other supporting team here to help to get things done. Thank you.
All right, I think I am up. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see many familiar faces and names. It's good to catch up with folks. For those who we haven't met yet, I'm Andy McCracken. I am Strategic Initiatives and Reporting Manager here at NCPRO. My job today is to talk through the different data that we need to see from you all in the reports that you submit. Youngjin shared that the expense report screen. So I'm going to be talking about the programmatic data elements that are toward the bottom of the screen there. So first question is about completion status. U.S. Treasury, we've adopted most of this from what U.S. Treasury requires that we submit. And so there is a completion status data point where it's just a drop down and you indicate whether the program has not started, or if it has started, if it's less than 50% complete, more than 50% complete, or if you're all wrapped up, then you say you're completed. The second question, and Youngjin highlighted this, we need current period obligations. This should largely be captured or should be reflected by the I'll share in a moment the detailed attachment that that you will need to submit along with this, but we need to know what commitments you've made with the funding. In most cases, that's going to be you've entered a contract for services, or you have further sub-granted money out, and you have a more traditional contract agreeing to give that funding out. However, based on really the purpose of tracking obligations is to understand where we are in relation to the December 31st, 2024 deadline to obligate SFRF funds. So even that, run to Staples for $300, that would count toward obligations, even though you haven't necessarily signed and agreed, a contract with Staples for the paper reams that you purchased. So we need to understand sort of that full picture of where you are in relation to funding being available. So that would include those traditional contract obligations, and then other expenses that may not have fallen under contract, but would otherwise mean that funding is no longer available. So just to put a point on it, your expenses, your total cumulative expenses should never exceed your total cumulative obligations. Obligations should always be equal to or greater than your expenditures. Happy to talk about that. It's a tricky point. It sort of goes against how accounting is ordinarily done for these purposes. But again, we are having to adopt some creative approaches that U.S. Treasury has adopted for how we manage these funds. Question 3 is a brief description, a brief narrative about what happened during the prior month. So this can help describe, contracts that you may have entered, some of those the financial activity, or you can say, look, we're reaching out to stakeholders, we're developing partnerships. We just want to have a sense of really what's happening on the ground with these projects. Subaward activities. So this is going to be a little bit of a unique one that this is the one question that will need to be included in here that doesn't directly apply to you all. You'll be required to submit an attachment with your monthly submission, and that attachment will account for any subaward activities that you all undertake. So you can answer, I'll just go ahead and answer yes to this, but it is this is not a material question for you all, but again, based on the PANGRAM system, it is a question that will still apply for all of the revenue replacement category, including our direct recipients. Question 6 is about program income. So it's a yes or no question. If the project that you are conducting generates income, so if there's some sort of ticket sales or falling short on examples here, but so if as you would ordinarily track program income, we need to know about that and account for that. So that's where you'd report it there. If you answer yes, there are some follow-up questions about that. And you'll be able to see those when it comes up, but pretty straightforward. It's asking really just how much program income have you earned and how much have you expended. Questions 7 and 8 are related. So question 7 is what we are calling the service metric. So this is our effort to, on a month-to-month basis, really figure out what is the reach of the various SFRF programs. Now, understanding that these programs are all very different across the state, there's really no one-size-fits-all metric for this. So we have provided a few options for you in the drop-down, but you do have the opportunity to complete the other category, and that'll prompt a follow-up question for you to describe what you mean by other. But the idea here is just to understand as we go, who are you reaching primarily with your program? We ask you to select one unit of measurement for this and be consistent with that through the duration of the program. Just to note, this is different than the overall performance reporting that will happen, impact analysis, which will look more holistically, more comprehensively at the long-term outcomes of the programs. This is really just sort of on a month-to-month basis, who's being reached by these programs. Right now, the question is oriented around quarters. So it does ask that you provide a number that is cumulative for that current quarter. So say in the month of October being the first quarter or first month of that quarter, if you have reached 100 households, you would indicate that you've reached 100 households. If in that next month, in November, you reached an additional 50 households, your total reported number for the month of November would be 150 households. So it is intended to accumulate there. We are having some conversations about whether to refine that for these purposes. Again, a lot of this is driven by what we received as requirements from Treasury. So go figure, some of the Treasury requirements have since changed. So we're looking at how we can better adapt this data collection. So question 7 is for you to identify that metric. And then question 8 is for you to tell us what the value of that metric is. And I will note there's no question 5. I know that it's missing Q5. That is intentional. We were able to actually, as a result of some changes in the federal reporting, we were able to actually remove that question for revenue replacement altogether. So yay, we got rid of one. So with that, I am going to actually pull up and do a brief live demo of the detailed expense attachment that for direct recipients for you all, you will need to submit to us on a monthly basis. For any subaward programs, if you are a beneficiary, then the monthly reporting doesn't apply to you. But if you are a subrecipient of these funds carrying out a program, then this does apply. So let me swap my screens here. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Great. So I apologize if these numbers are showing up real small for you on the screen. Try to get in here, but this is the basic layout of how this document is designed. And we'll provide some fresh templates for you all to use as you start your reporting. But this is the certification page. This is where really you only need to interact with the yellow cells here Anything that's grayed out or really any of these other boxes are formula driven, so don't play around with those. The only exception here is the comments box here. You can add notes about anything you want to highlight as taking place in this report, but you'll provide the agreement number you have from NCPRO, identify your organization. Each month you'll want to select your reporting month. The reporting month is the month during which you are submitting the report. So even though in December you would be submitting your data for activities that occurred in November, you would identify December as the reporting month and then provide the date of submission. So if you are further subgranting funds out, and for true subgrants, so you are entering a grant agreement with another entity to carry out the underlying purposes of the program. This is different than a services contract, sort of a vendor that's just providing goods or services. If it's a true subgrant, then you would enter the subgrantee information on this tab number 2. And you will need to provide that entity's UEI, or you can provide the entity's tax ID number. So it's most likely going to be the EIN. And so you can do either of those. You don't have to provide both, pick one or the other. And then you provide the name. I provided some just, fake examples here. In ordinary circumstances, we identify here if it's a required field or if it's optional. So obviously you'd go ahead and add the entity's address in here as well. And then you provide the subgrant information. So if tab 2 provides the entities with whom you are contracting for the subgrants, tab 3 is where you tell us information about those subgrants themselves. So you would identify the month during which that subaward action is taking place. You'd enter the entity's UEI or TIN. Subrecipient name will automatically pop up based on that, so that there's consistency, but you can make sure you're tracking the right entities here. We'll need you to provide a subaward number. This can really be anything that you are going to use for your records keeping to uniquely identify activities that are occurring under that subgrant with your subgrantee. The only requirements that we provide is that it be a number. It has to be numeric and between 3 and 10 digits. And please make sure it doesn't start with a 0. General rule: when you're asked to provide a self-generated number for NCPRO, don't start with a 0. Start with really any other digit, because our data systems get upset when it starts with a 0. You provide that, and then you will enter the obligation amount in obligation amount here, and then you'll provide the date on which you provided that subaward action took place. And then you would enter the place of performance. So place of performance may be the same as the subrecipient address, but it may be different. So you may have an entity that's headquartered, for example, in Raleigh, but the project is going to be primarily based in out east. So you would provide the primary place of performance, and then we'll want to just see a description of what is the purpose of the subaward. And so you have a field there to enter what is the subaward going to accomplish. And then tab 4 here, related to subgrants, is where you would enter the actual payments that you've made to those subawards. This will help us keep track of where those subgrants are between the obligation of the subaward and then the actual payments that go out to those entities. And here again, so this is where you'd identify that entity by their subaward number now, and then as a verification, it'll pull the subaward entity name, just so again, making sure that it's all aligning there. provide the date of that payment and the payment amount. And say you're making multiple payments over time. So let's take this example. So say in January, you're saying that subaward number 99999. So you see that that name automatically comes up. Say you're saying that you gave them another payment on New Year's Eve for an additional let's say it's an initial $10,000. So you'd enter that uniquely here. You wouldn't go back and amend the prior payment. They need to be recorded as unique payments. Similarly, say you overpaid them and need to deobligate funds from them, or reflect that they return money to you. Say they are returning $1,000, you'd enter negative $1,000, and there you go. So it'll keep track of that. Now, all of that sub-grant information you can track here by subaward number, UEI, TIN, the subrecipient name, and this is where it'll track the total obligations you provided, the total payments that you've recorded, and then the balance remaining on those various subgrants. So that's the deal with subgrants. For everything else, so any of your internal costs with staff or any contractor payments that you enter, that'll show up on tab 5, the non-subgrant expenditures. Over here in the sort of Navy category, you will identify the reporting month. This should all align to the reporting month that you provided on the certification page. You can identify whether it's a program expense or if this would count toward your administrative cost allowance. And then you have your lighter blue here, that's the personnel costs category. And then this purple here would be for contractors. And again, these are pretty self-explanatory fields, and then it totals the number here. And all of that comes back over to this page, which will track on a quarterly basis then how the money is adding up. And you'll get some warning messages or some scary red boxes come up if you are, for some reason, over obligating something, and that'll help catch if there are any errors in how things were entered. So I will stop there so we can move on to the rest of this, but we were just about done. Yeah, sorry, it's a lot of info. And we'll have follow-up sessions to help with this. The reporting team is very accessible to support on all things reporting and completing some of the data here. So as a reminder, reports are due by the 15th day of the month for the month following the close of the reporting period. So as Youngjin said, really that once the next month starts through the 15th is that primary reporting window. So please get it in by the 15th. And then last topic for today's discussion is performance planning and reporting. So we don't have a ton for you to do at this point. We are working right now with Deloitte Consulting to develop a framework along with toolkits and some additional templates and such that will support some meaningful performance planning. I think some of the project plans that you submitted have helped facilitate some of the early planning, and this will formalize the metrics that you're adopting for both the implementation milestones. So how much money should we expect to be spent by certain dates in the process, as an example, and then also the impact of the project. So what kind of outcomes do we expect to see over the course of the project? So that's generally what this will entail. Again, we'll have more information coming out on that soon as we wrap up our work with Deloitte. And with that, we're to Q&A. So I'll stop talking and feel free to jump in. You can raise your hand, you can take yourself off mute and start talking, or you can use the chat to raise any questions or comments.
Andy, this is Neil. when will the first reporting period start for the non-state agencies?
You all tell me.
Yeah,
I
that,
think
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I defer to others on that. But I think if folks are, if money is already moving and stuff, and you know, we can get this out, I think you know, the next available 15th would be appropriate. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we had talked about December 15th and get this
Yeah.
information out. Yes.
It looks like we have some questions in the chat. You will receive forms. We will share those with you, or share information. I'm not sure how it's going to arrive. And the slides and recording will be
Will be
available.
available. Yes.
And it looked like somebody had raised their hand. Maybe y'all are going to have to help because I can't tell on my phone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think, but now the hand went away, so I don't know. Does someone else have a question?
Well, if you think of something, please don't hesitate to ask your grants manager, or you can email the NCPRO main email, or you can email any of us. We'll get you to the right person. Usually your grants manager is the most efficient and knows how to get to where you need to go. So that's what I would encourage you to do.
We do have one more, Stephanie.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
In the chat, sub grants in the form are beneficiaries also. And I presume that's the subaward attachment. Maybe that question's about. Andy, you want to answer that one?
I defer to the grants team on what exactly needs to show up around that.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you
okay, can we get clarity
ask
on the question?
Yeah.
Sure. So on the form you just had up there, beneficiaries are not listed as an entity that needs to be reported. So I'm asking the question, are they considered sub-grantees? Because I think that's what the terminology was in the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
Okay, that I can answer. The answer is yes, but beneficiaries are not required under Treasury rules to report what you've done with your money once you designate, once you meet the requirements of being a beneficiary. Usually it's a loss or something like that. Then we give you all of your money up front. What we will do is we will follow up with you on a survey of some type, and we're working on those surveys with Deloitte now because we have a bunch of different types of beneficiaries who are receiving a portion of this $5.4 billion. We will follow up to ask you to fill that out to tell us what you did. But it's much more of an after the fact, and it is a different category because we don't have to track your expenditures. However, the state auditor and others, like the General Assembly, are going to be very interested in what you did with the money. So we will follow up. It'll just be different than this report form. Great question, Jerry. I know it gets confusing.
And Stephanie, if one of the direct recipients of NCPRO further if they have beneficiaries,
then
they would report them here.
Yeah, you will report it here. That's right. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to feedback from you on if, the kind of sessions you want to have in the future, if you found this helpful and things like that. So just let us know. We're here to help. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.